morning and welcome to this webinar. We're really excited to have everyone on board. I can see a lot of people are logging in at precisely 11 a.m. That's always good to see. So welcome to this webinar. Really happy to have so many people registered, so many people excited, waiting in the waiting room, waiting to join the webinar. My name is Vikrant, and I head the marketing practice here at InspireOne, and I'm very happy to have all of you on board. This webinar, which is on developing tomorrow's leaders, a very relevant topic for all leaders across organizations to tackle, to talk and discuss about. Yet, very few have been able to actually crack this code of developing tomorrow's leaders. So I have the duty and the privilege today, right now, to introduce our esteemed speakers, and we have such a good panel of speakers. But first, let's talk just a small bit about the presenters of this webinar, which is InspireOne. We are a firm with 25 years of experience, and we are an organizational development and leadership development firm that's striving or helping organizations attain sustainable growth through three levers of leadership: vision, culture, and values, and driving growth velocity. And now moving on, let's talk about the speakers. Firstly, we have Miss Pooja Nagpal. She is the head of learning and development at Kohler. She has deep expertise and passion for learning and talent development. She has helped teams, organizations, and she's driven business results through talent management, leadership development, organization development, global leadership programs. She also has, and she comes with experience in companies like Mercer, Larsen and Toubro, Infotech, EY, Dell. Pooja, we're really happy to have you on board. Next, we have Mr. Vineet Aswani. Vineet has around 23 years of experience in global learning and development, organizational development, succession planning, coaching, leadership and strategy direction. He has extensive experience in coaching and building leadership pipeline. Previously, he's taken up roles of VP and assistant VP at Aegis and Genpact, respectively. I'm sure the insights you'll bring, Vineet, will be really enriching for our panelists and for our attendees. So welcome, Vineet. Next, we have Mr. Syed Azfar Hussain. Mr. Aswar has close to 30 years of experience in the industry of global learning and development. Previously, he's worked for companies like RPG, Deloitte, Hewlett Packard, and Flex. He's got great experience in talent management, leadership development, organizational development. Someone who has great insights in India, outside of India, in states, in China, and has a lot of experience and knowledge that he will bring in this session. So really happy to have you on board. Finally, we have our very own Mr. Sumit Sahni. Sumit is the CEO and partner at InspireOne. Sumit has trained close to 8,000 people in workshops that he has conducted all over the globe. He has experience on topics like strategic thinking, strategic execution, innovation, digital transformation, change management, customer centricity, and sales leadership. So, Sumit, it's always a pleasure to welcome you to our webinars. With that being said, I will not take much of time of our attendees. Sumit, let me pass it to you, and then we can start our session.
Thanks so much, Vikrant, and good morning, everyone. First of all, I'd like to thank all the panelists today for taking out your time. I know how busy schedule is, so I really, really appreciate time, Aswar, that you are putting in. Pooja, Vineet, thanks so much for it, and also thanks to all the attendees who have logged in for the session today. I'm sure it'll be a great conversation that we'll all have on this entire topic of developing high potential leaders. Now, before I get started, maybe I'll set the context a little bit around why now. Why this is a critical area, and maybe a couple of researches I'll quote, and then our own point of view before we dive straight in. So I was looking at some of the recent research done by Gartner around what are the top HR priorities for organizations in 2024. And it was not surprising to see that the number one priority that came out in that research was around leadership and manager development. And it's interesting because our own point of view on the matter has also been that during the pandemic, and though we are now out of pandemic in some way, but there is still a ripple effect of the pandemic. Most organizations were focusing a lot more on manager development, but not much work could be done truly in the area of leadership development or high potential development. And therefore, we felt that this year, 2023 onwards, is where most organizations will start going back into leadership development and start thinking about what can they do to identify as well as develop high potential leaders. Similarly, the other research, from Brandon Hall Group, has pointed quite clearly that organizations who have a scientific approach towards high potential development are able to increase their leadership bench strength by as much as 53%, which is a substantial return on investment, given that when organizations look at succession planning, they always have a choice to build or buy. And buy is always a much more expensive decision rather than build. In fact, one Harvard research has found out that it's 10x more expensive to buy rather than to build leaders from within, specifically the high potential leaders. And therefore, we thought that this will be a very critical topic to have a conversation today on. And when we were looking at speakers and panelists to invite for the session, we thought that no better than the three individuals and the three panelists that we have in a session today. So with that context, we'll get started. And, I'll start off with a very quick question, to all the panelists. And maybe, Azfar, we'll love to get started with you. And then, we'll go to Pooja and Vineet. So one of the key questions, that I wanted to get the group's view on was that before we even talk about how to develop high potentials, I think it will be good to deliberate as a group around what is it that they need development on. I know there's a lot of work that has been done. There's substantial amount of research available, but wanted to get your practical perspectives on the matter too, so that when you look at high potentials in the industries that you are in, what are those 4 or 5 key areas that you think high potentials need development on?
So first of all, Sumit, thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be speaking along with my esteemed co-panelists, and also big thanks to all the people who've logged in to listen to us. I hope they find that's worth the while. So in the organizations that I've worked with, and more recently Bajaj FinServ and RPG, where over the last 10 years, where I've done most of my work, I find that all organizations nowadays have some set of values or competencies or capabilities, or they may be called leadership traits. The labels differ, but most organizations have in a way defined what they think leaders should be, what capabilities or behaviors leaders should demonstrate in some way or the other. So usually when you're talking about top talent development, the development is in some way connected to these. There's obviously a diagnostic that's done to figure out which ones of these are more required for a particular level of people than others. But however, if you were to ask me my personal opinion, irrespective of the what the organization has defined as leadership area, the biggest, I think, the biggest ROI is likely to come if you have focus on self-leadership, because in the end, it's it's people's internal constraints, the way they think, whether they're secure, insecure, whether they're able to trust people, not trust people. These have a great impact on the way a leader behaves. So I would definitely focus on self-leadership as an area of development. In fact, if I had my way, I'd ensure that all of them went to a process lab. The other areas, most industries are getting disrupted or will get disrupted in some way or the other in terms of business model or the competitive landscape because of the technology that are coming in. So the other area, I think, that top talent should be developed on is to understand the impact of technologies on the business models of their industry and the competitive landscape of the industry going forward. The third area, and this, as you can imagine, means that all organizations are likely to go through significant change. So the third area is around change leadership, uh, covering how do you architect change, how do you lead your team through change, and how do you lead yourself through the transition. So all three areas. The fourth and the fifth area are in a way connected. They're about looking outward. So how do you kind of think strategically, and how do you ensure that your processes and your systems are customer centric, and how do you kind of put that into effect in your part of the organization. And lastly, I think it's important that one of the big responsibilities that senior leaders have is that they shape culture. So it is to understand how do you build culture and what's your role in building culture. So those are the areas that I focus on.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Aswar. I think really powerful points, and love the point on self-leadership as contributing to the biggest ROI. There's a lot of experience behind that statement.
That's right.
Great. Pooja, what would you like to add, on this?
So, first of all, hi to everyone, and I'm glad to be a part of this forum, and glad to share this forum with Syed and Vineet. I have a slightly different viewpoint on this, as much as I feel that it's about self-leadership, it's about developing people, and developing your business. One thing which we need to inculcate as a practice in our top talent and top talent development is to make people at the top understand that what role do they play in the culture of the organization. If we talk about the cultural shift and cultural drivers, I think if you want to drive a cultural shift in the organization, these are the right people. You have to make them the torch bearers of that cultural change, because unless and until you're not able to move the culture in the organization, as much as we want people to develop on competencies, capabilities, have those leadership skill set, nothing can come to picture, nothing can be done if the culture itself is not promoting that. And this is basis my experience in the organizations I have worked in. So as much as we invest in top leadership development, top talent development, most of it at the end of it falls flat. We still have people iterating. We still have people leaving the organization despite of the efforts we put in. Why? Because somewhere the culture in the organization is not supporting that development. So if we are first able to move that needle when it comes to the cultural shift, top talent development would become a cakewalk to us. So this has been my experience and my opinion.
Very interesting. I think there are these two nuances of culture that you picked up on. One is the top talent being the ambassadors of the desired culture that the organizations are aiming to achieve. But the second is also to be able to create a culture which nurtures the top talent and a developmental culture overall within the organization. Thanks so much. Vineet, what would you like to add?
So I think a very powerful list has already been shared, and I agree to what both of them have shared on this topic. All that I'd like to add here is two very sensitive areas which are taking more shape in the time and the realities that we are in today. One is how do we become more inclusive?
Absolutely.
Because that is more an underlying or a foundational way of thinking which needs to come in. And inclusiveness is not about trying to bring in a certain gender orientation or inclusiveness. It is thought inclusiveness first, and then rest could follow very easily into any sphere or stream that we'd like to do. The second thing I think is it's a reality that as you grow up in the organization at senior leadership positions, we do become even more lonely. We don't have easy options to share about our own frustrations and issues. And at some times that kind of builds up in a way that we probably sometimes even stop listening deeply. So I think humble inquiry as one of the key areas where we are able to be willing to be vulnerable in front of our people, because I think this is a tremendous pressure high potential leaders have taken on themselves, or organizational cultures have imposed on them, saying they need to be the role models, and that means they need to have all the answers, they need to be doing everything right. That's not the case. They don't need all the answers. They don't need to, all that they need to do is to be able to understand what's really going on through methods like humble inquiry, by being vulnerable, and then lead the organization to what's needed. That is what I'd like to add here.
Very powerful. I mean, I think the list that we've all drawn up is quite phenomenal. And I agree completely. I think, one of the core issues that at least we are also seeing as far as high potential development is the entire aspect of thoughtful inclusiveness or thought inclusiveness, because it has a direct impact on not just the culture of the organization, but the ability to innovate and the ability to have accelerate the strategy execution. And love the point of view, Vineet, on humble inquiry as well. I think there is a fair amount of nuance that we must explore later in this call, particularly when we talk about maybe coaching or some of the other developmental methodologies. So to that point, maybe I'll ask a follow-up question. And this time around, Vineet, why don't we start with you? And that is what, as per the group's view, derails the high potential development. I mean, and the derailers can be of any types, right? The derailer can be a personal derailer that I, as a top talent, may be facing, or the derailer can be at an organization level. So happy to hear any types of derailers that you believe through your experience are the top derailers.
I think you've started with the first key derailer anyway. It could be personal transitions that many a times we are not even aware of. Most organizations don't invest that level of attention to understand what leaders are going through. It's only a list of more and more actions, making them superheroes, trying to prove them to be superheroes. I think the other important part is the change that is caused by the disruption that's happening globally. A lot of your traditional methods of doing things are failing. New methods are emerging. And how are we then supporting them through this journey? And if that support is missing, that itself becomes a derailer to progressing in the organization. And it's not just the change that's happening outside the industry. We will see a lot of change happening even within the organizations. Absolutely. That's not necessarily been landing very well for employees and leaders. And that's something that we got to be careful of as a key derailer.
Got it.
So these are top two that come to my mind, and I'll probably let others add to this.
Yes, no, and I think personal transitions is a big one, because a lot of times when we work with high potential leaders and top talent, we start realizing that, or they start realizing in the process that they have moved into, let's say, a new role or a new focus area, but the role has moved, the individual has not, and they're still working in an old way in trying to deal with a new challenge. So it's a significant area. Syed, what would you like to add?
Sorry, did you mean me? Sumit?
Yes, sir, yes.
Okay. So I think, to my mind, if a top talent or a high potential leader has tasted success in just one area, I think that's a potential derailer. I can give an example of a gentleman who joined an organization I used to work with as a CEO, but had worked the previous 27 years in the same organization, right? And he'd never experienced a different context, and that, in a way, ended up derailing him. So I think it's very important, therefore, for organizations to provide different contexts to top talent, to be able to help them understand that what works in one context may not work in another context, and therefore help build that flexibility of approach. I think if that isn't there, then that's a potential derailer. Connected to my self-leadership, but lack of self-awareness is a definite derailer going forward. not having tasted failure at some point in time, I think, is a potential derailer. And of course, the I know best attitude, because you've been so successful so far, therefore I know best, I think, is a huge derailer.
Thanks so much. And I think the point on context is a very powerful point, because one of the I won't call it issues, but one of the realities of most organizations in India has been that leaders, till the time they reach a top talent, have grown functionally. And because they have grown functionally, they are used to only one particular context. Sometimes it's limited to that particular function. The context is not even different from any other function.
Right.
And it then, and because functional growth lies primarily on execution ability and the ability to win, and the economy has been going great. Generally, there's more success if you do the basics right. And but the challenge happens when they have to make a shift to a more senior leadership role, where some of these derailers start becoming very critical.
Right. Very true.
Great. And Pooja, what would you like to add on this?
So, couple of things which I have observed over years. One is definitely a lack of clear developmental plans. So, see, if high potentials today, they are not provided with clear developmental plans or goals, they may lack the direction which they are looking for, and they'll be very disengaged. And without a proper roadmap for the growth, I may not even know that which is that area where I need to develop myself, which is where I have the developmental opportunities. So having those, clear developmental plans, most of the organizations today, we do have a lot of developmental plans, but they are not in sync to what the person is aspiring to achieve. So that being one. The second, I always feel, is a lack of feedback in coaching. Coaching plays a very crucial role when it comes to development of any top talent. Though I think Indian organizations today, they are becoming more privy to the concept of coaching, but coaching again is a very new terminology when it comes to India. We are still nurturing the fact that coaching exists, because most of the top leadership today, when we approach them to coach, they kind of get confused between coaching and mentoring and training. They do not really understand what coaching is. So inculcating that culture of coaching is also important, and which again derails us from putting that plan for a top development in place. Yes, there's another thing which I have observed and which has come to us as a feedback, is an insufficient challenge and stretch assignments. So there are a lot of times people say that, we are doing run-of-the-mill job, which we are hired for, but what beyond that? Without any challenging assignments or projects or any kind of, development for high potential will become like a stagnant affair. They are not able to move further. So these are the top three, which I feel are the derailers, which can lead to the development of any top talent.
Absolutely. And I think brilliant perspective. In fact, my own point of view on the individual development plan is that we need a lot more data and science as organizations to be able to create, for the lack of better word, the Google Maps at an individual level for progression. Because, a right type of a developmental plan has the right set of experiences which are inbuilt for the individual, stretch assignments or work shadowing or other areas. And I think we are just at a starting point. I think there are thoughts, but I think where I feel that as an industry, we need to move on is to apply some very solid data and research, behind Pooja, what you said, so that the developmental plans are a lot more practical, aspirational, and also maybe as a lover of technology, a lot more user friendly than what they have been, up till now. So thanks so much. I think wonderful perspectives again. And I think let me do a quick summary before we move on. So we've spoken about many derailers. We spoke about personal transition as one critical derailer. The fact that there is a fair amount of change happening externally and internally in organizations. So not having a support system. We spoke about how leaders have either only tasted success or not really tested failure as one of the critical derailers. Lack of self-awareness was another one that we spoke about. And Aswar also spoke about, I know the best. I have the I have the know-it-all attitude rather than having a learn-it-all attitude. And then Pooja, you spoke about the individual development plans, the feedback and coaching as a critical component. So let's shift gears now and let's start talking a little bit about some of the development methodologies. And Aswar, maybe I'll come to you specifically for this particular question, which is around coaching. And I think as Pooja was saying, coaching is one of the critical developmental methodologies, but it's still very new, to this part of the globe. So would love to get your thoughts around coaching, the power of it, and how you've seen it transform and change leaders.
So I think definitely very powerful. However, it is an expensive, relatively expensive way of going about development. So therefore, the organization needs to make sure that some questions are asked before they jump into coaching. I think the first question is, why are you choosing coaching? I think I found that usually it fails if it's being positioned as a remedial way of development. So, you're not doing well, we'll get you a coach. So I have this story again of, there was a CEO that I was working with, and he was struggling after about a year and a half into his job. And the board suggested to him that, maybe we should get you a coach. This was a first-time CEO. Okay. And there was this, the board members went around and, found an ex-CHRO of a Fortune 500 company based in Switzerland to coach this person. And, he went through 4 or 5 sessions and said, this is useless, doesn't work. And the coaching was abandoned, right? It was a huge amount of investment made, which went waste. I find that the coaching works best when, you have a coachee who's interested and willing. And usually that's usually likely to be the case if you're positioning it as a developmental intervention to help them achieve something that's, part of their aspirations, right? So again, I've seen, for example, when you've had, say, multiple contenders for a role, and you're saying that we like to help you get there, and coaching is one way of getting there. It's been very successful. I think it's been very successful if, in fact, my preferred way of using coaching is to incorporate it into a larger learning journey, which has other components of learning as well. There, I think, the different learning methodologies, including coaching, serve to reinforce each other, and therefore the impact that gets created is much greater. It, of course, works really well if, all key stakeholders have bought into the idea. I know at times when the manager doesn't think very highly of the entire coaching idea, so they say, okay, senior management wants you to get coached, go have a good time, kind of a thing. So then it diminishes the value of coaching in the mind of the person who's going to get coached, and therefore he or she may not be as serious about it. So the other consideration is the number of coaching sessions. So, for example, we run programs with InspireOne, as you know, Sumit, where the number of coaching sessions are 6. And we've recently been going through the end of program presentations made by participants. And 80% of the participants have come back to us saying that, can we continue with the coaching sessions beyond the program? So in a way, there's a feeling that 6 coaching sessions aren't sufficient. And I think in a way that reinforces my own belief that ideally should be at least 8 or 10. That's a good number of coaching sessions, or appropriate number of coaching sessions to really help people make progress. The other one is, of course, trying to identify a person who's an appropriate coach for a coachee. It's very important that the coach have credibility in the eyes of the coachee, and whatever that whether it's an industry match, whether it's a, so some of the people prefer in-person coaching. So whether it's better to have a coach who's in the city that you're in, or whether it's someone who's been in the same functional area that you've worked in. So that may have an impact at times in the mind of the coachee, not so much in the actual effectiveness of the coaching process. But again, what's in the mind of the coachee will have an impact on the success of the engagement. I think it's important to have a conversation at the beginning of the coaching engagement between the key stakeholders, so that the coaching goals get signed off by everyone, so that there's clarity about what the coaching process is going to focus on. I think that's important. And of course, a debrief at the end is usually a good idea because it helps provide closure to the entire exercise. So that's been my experience.
Absolutely. Now, I think my own experience on the matter is also, just to add another point which is related to what you were saying, was the governance. The governance is very, very critical. And I'm really talking about here the governance between the coach and the coachee. And I personally believe that the ownership actually lies more on the coach, because coach has to ensure that every session has objectives defined, it's linked to the previous, because otherwise these conversations can become a very struggle all over the. And I feel that coaches have to be obligated to hold coaches accountable in a nice manner, in a polite manner, but putting together a very strong personal, governance mechanism. And specifically when organizations are considering coaching at scale, which is a large group of leaders going through coaching parallelly, governance, makes a whole. The other perspective on the matter that I just wanted to bring out to the panel is that what we are also realizing is that for certain type of top talent, maybe the right side of top talent, organizations will eventually start considering what we call as the concept of anchor coaching. It's almost like this, that, when I'm trying to reduce weight as an individual, I need two types of help. One is someone who can help me with my diet, and someone else who can help me with my fitness regime or the exercises that I should be doing. The one-in-the-box coaching approach has its own limitations, because sometimes as coaching conversations happen, the coach may start realizing that this person is on the right journey, but maybe I need to arrange a couple of extra sessions with someone else who can provide expertise in a specific point as it may require. So one of the areas that we are seeing more and more trend towards is the concept of anchor coaching, where, let's say if I'm coaching an individual, I'm just the anchor coach doing the majority of the coaching sessions. But once in a while, I'll pull in the support coach, who can help truly in the total development of the person. So I think the traditional model needs to be kind of relooked at, and busted is not the right word, but made it sharper, make it more individual centric rather than the restricted mechanisms that have been operating till now.
As long as it doesn't add to the cost of the coaching engagement.
Exactly.
So
it boils down to that, right? Before we proceed, let me just take pause to see if there are any questions from the group. I think there was one quick question which was more logistics, which has been answered, but we'll proceed. But to all the attendees, if there are any questions that you have from the panelists, feel free to ask it on the Q&A box, and we'll ensure that we are able to raise your questions at the right time. Moving on, Pooja, let me come to you now and get your perspectives on the development front. So there is coaching as one of the critical methodologies we've spoken about. But what, as per you, apart from coaching, are some of the new age approaches that you're seeing that can help accelerate in high potential development? Some of the experiments that you may be leading internally, or maybe seeing others lead in, within the organizations.
Thanks. And Syed, I kind of agree to your point that, you have to create that culture of coaching for for people to understand the essence of it. Having said that, as much as coaching, feedback are very crucial and important things in any employee development, some of the things which I have now seen is a more inclusive approach in high potential development. When I say more inclusive approach, for example, this is something which we started within the organization, which is including our high potentials in our succession planning conversations.
Mhm.
And this is something which we are planning, which we are doing for the first time. So what we do, we are trying to include our high potentials in succession planning discussions, so that we are able to identify the future leadership roles, and we can develop strategies along with our high potentials in filling those positions. And because when we involve them in succession planning discussion, it also provides high potential with a clear roadmap or a clear career path which they are looking for. And that will motivate them to develop the necessary skills which is required for the next role. So this is something which we just started doing for the organization. Having said that, I still feel this is still a very selfish approach. What we need to do, if we have to retain our top talent, we also need to think what is that they need to develop. Which is where they want to see themselves in the next 4 or 5 years. And that is where we are now looking at tie-ups with universities. We are looking at tie-ups with some of the top B schools, because as much as we do our internal development, that will only lead to a very limited development, which is pertaining just to the organization and the current skill sets which we need in our people. But taking it a step beyond, understand where does my employee wants to see himself? What are his future aspirations and goals? So tying up with B schools like ISB and introducing programs through ISB, that gives them the platform where they just feel that, my growth and my development is not just limited to this particular organization. The organization is also thinking about my future prospects. So that is something which we haven't planned for next year, which we definitely intend to do. Another thing which we are doing currently as a practice is job rotations. Now, when I say job rotations, it's very important that
I think maybe we've lost Pooja's audio. Okay, so I think I'm sure she'll log in a middle. But everyone can still hear me, right? I hope it's not an issue with my end. Great, wonderful. So I think while Pooja logs in, Vineet, if you don't mind, maybe we can hear your perspectives on this, both on new age approaches and Pooja was talking about job rotation, which is a very immersive approach towards development. So your perspectives will be helpful.
I think adding to what Asfar and Pooja mentioned, I think they mentioned two very key areas. One was to begin with coaching, as a key component to how we build our leadership potential. And the other one on the areas of trying to build in job rotations. What was missing in the past approach to high potential development was that they were quite linear approaches. At most organizations offer them either an outside institution to go through a course or do something more internally for them. But I think to begin with, rather than creating linear journeys, creating more immersive, which starts with a very clear self-assessment, followed with more like a 360 view of where they stand, not just in their own eyes, but in the view of people who they work with very closely, which would then help them identify what are the core areas that needs to be worked upon. And then development journeys can be built, which are not just helping them overcome or build those skills, but clearly give them an opportunity after those learning sessions to apply those back at work, which essentially means then organizations need to create opportunities for them where they could apply what they learn from these different sources The second is they get stretch opportunities or job rotations, for example, to look at different sides of the business to become more holistic in their approach. And
Absolutely.
the third is to be able to not just develop themselves, but reach to a point where they can be confident of developing more leaders under them.
Exactly.
And that seals in many ways, their own development, because what do we understand by development? It doesn't mean I develop. It means that when I develop, I also develop the ability to develop others.
Absolutely.
And that's the core to me of any leadership development, that if we aren't able to develop leaders who are capable to develop more leaders through their abilities, then I don't think they're doing the right job. So yeah, I mean that's what is shifting, and in more global context, as I said, managing 27 different countries and different cultures. These are common threads that are prevalent in literally all cultures. I mean, I began this journey at Colt by thinking, how would I coach somebody sitting in Germany or France over a screen? I don't think I'll be able to do a good job of it. So my myth of just doing it face to face got busted, and that gave me an opportunity to deal with different cultures and do still meaningful work for them. So I think we got to move away from traditional thinking, make our journeys more immersive, help them apply those learnings, and also ask a vital question from them, which is to what extent in their journey they are willing to remain committed to these high challenging environment. Because I think that's a place where a lot of this fails, because everyone's like really want to be in the high potential category, but if you really ask them, can they sustain those levels of engagement when organizations put them there, a lot of times the answer is no.
Exactly. And I think just to build up a couple of points before I go back to Pooja, is that I remember that maybe this was a year ago. We were running a high potential program for an organization, and as it happens, typically in high potential programs, you have an evening dinner, drinks. You are chatting with people or participants more informally. And there was this really strong leader who I was talking to over drinks, and I was asking him, "What is your career aspiration?" And he said something. He said, "Sumit, I am." He's been a salesperson throughout his career, sales manager, very successful business head. And he says, "What has been attracting me since my childhood is marketing and brand." And I said, and he said, "But I don't know whether I'll get that opportunity." I said, "Have you asked that question, whether you'll get that opportunity?" He says, "No." And then he asked me, "Do you think I should be asking that question?" I said, "Absolutely. Because if you don't ask that particular question, then how are you going to get it?" Right. So I think there is some bit of perspectives and process interventions that are required, so that people who are willing to take the risk, people who are wanting to change trajectory, they find it comfortable to be able to do that. And I think on the immersions, my personal point of view on the matter is that, if we imagine the different types of immersions, if we imagine all in front of us like a 2x2 matrix, where in x-axis we have internal immersions and external immersions. And in the y-axis, we have immersions which are related to understanding the business of today. And on top, we have immersions which are important to understand the business of tomorrow. I think if organizations start looking at immersions as a holistic framework, keeping in mind the individual need to say, what are the type of internal immersions that this person needs to go through for today, internal immersions for future of the company tomorrow, and so externally, then the type of developmental framework that can start developing can be very, very unique and very powerful. So hence a lot more work I feel that organizations need to invest. Before I go and look at some of the audience questions, let me just check with Pooja. Pooja, have you been able to log in again?
Yes, I in fact was reading some of the questions, and one of the questions is that, can you suggest some practical ways in which we can develop high potentials? I think it's a very good question. And see, as much as I say that, going out and doing those tie-ups and tying up with universities, everything is very important. One thing which we need and we should be doing is, encouraging our high potentials to build networks both within and outside the organization. And because when they are able to build those networks, we have to provide them those opportunities so that, they get to interact with senior leaders outside of the organizations. They are able to attend industry events. They are able to participate in professional associations. We have to give them that exposure to diverse perspectives and experiences, which will obviously in turn broaden their horizon and will foster their personal and professional growth. So most of what we are doing right now is fostering their professional growth. What about their personal growth? That can only come through great networking. And we as organizations can give them that platform where they can go and network and build those contacts for themselves. So I think that can answer this question that, if you have to think about a practical and what can be a low-hanging fruit, this is definitely a low-hanging fruit.
Absolutely. Thanks.
We lost Sumit.
Sorry, Aswani, you saying?
Yeah. No, I lost you for a few seconds there. Sorry.
Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yes, yes.
So I was just building upon, Pooja's point that there is a particular assessment, tool that we have for self-awareness that we leverage. Some of the organizations sitting here today have also leveraged it. And what I've realized in many cases is that if a leader's scores on inquisitiveness is low, generally their scores on sociability is also low, which means they're not really networking enough, because networking is helping me also to build deeper knowledge of the context outside. And therefore, very, very powerful point, Pooja, from you. Let me take up another question from the audience, and maybe I'll say the question, and happy to hear anyone answer it. So one of the questions that has come up is, how important is vulnerability and building a fearless organization for leaders? So Azfar, Vineet, Pooja, any one of you?
So I think Vineet touched upon vulnerability earlier at the start of this conversation. I think it's important because when you're willing to be vulnerable, it means that you're communicating to the other person that you trust them not to take advantage of your vulnerability. So in a way, you're role modeling trust. And trust, as we know, is a foundational element of any high-performing team. So hugely important.
Neet, anything you would like to add?
I think he's answered it so brilliantly. And if there is, if we are able to create enough trust, which also means that we will become even more vulnerable, which that itself will mean that we will be a fearless organization. Because what is fear in organizations? The fear is only to say what you want to say or to express what you want to express. But if they, especially at a leadership level, when they see leaders being vulnerable, which tells them that if they can do it, it's absolutely okay for us to do it, because that's how they emulate every action that the leadership demonstrates. So I think it's not a theory. It is not just a thought. It is real action. People need to demonstrate what vulnerability is, and then be able to create that environment of trust that can build the foundation for a fearless organization. I'm not saying that's the only thing that we need to do to build fearless organization, but it's a critical component without which psychological safety cannot be built, which is an enabler to a culture like that.
And I think the easiest way to do that, or for a leader to role model that, is to publicly acknowledge if they've made mistakes. To say that, I made a mistake, I'm sorry, that was my fault, kind of thing. So then it gives permission for others to admit their mistakes, and so they generally just
I think
start
this is
a positive spiral.
Absolutely. And this conversation reminds me of original TMI concept. So Klaus Mahler, who was the founder of TMI, a company that we represent in India, he had written a book called Employeeship many years ago, almost 30, 40 years ago. And the definition of employeeship was what makes a good employee. Like there is citizenship is what makes a good citizen. Employeeship is about what makes a good employee. And one of the characteristics that he had spoken about in this book was loyalty. And And his perspective on loyalty was that loyalty, a loyal employee is not obedient. A loyal employee will disagree, will state a different point of view, and therefore how as leaders we need to be operating with this mindset that loyalty is not obedience. So when people are coming and disagreeing with me, I need to just become comfortable with the fact that they are engaged, and they're wanting to share their point of view. So very powerful, concept. Let's look at some more questions. So one of the questions that have come up is on stretch assignments. So talking about stretch assignments that are challenging in nurture, a lot of leaders raise a concern that they don't have the bandwidth to focus considering the work pressure. How do we make them see value in it?
So I think the definition of a stretch assignment is that it will stretch your bandwidth. so you need to be open to the idea of stretching your bandwidth. And I think very simply the way to make it seem meaningful is if you say, okay, if you do this stretch assignment, these are the experiences, capabilities that you will learn, and how this will help you meet your career aspirations. So in the end, you really have to connect it back to what that person is aspiring for in their professional career, because only that will motivate them to put that extra effort.
Exactly. Pooja,
Yeah,
Vineet,
yes, I like to add something in. This is a very valid question, because when it comes to the practical aspect, where I'm juggling between two jobs, where I have my own workload and on top of it I am made to work on a stretch assignment. See, here in the beginning itself, it's very important that to make them understand that this is a chance to expand their own skills, knowledge, and capabilities. This is something which they are doing for their own development. And for that, they need to step out of their comfort zone and they have to take up new challenges. So as much as we have to make them see that, this is an investment in themselves, they have to embrace this opportunity as a way to grow and develop professionally. So this thought, if this is put into them right in the beginning itself, that this is for your own development, this is for yourself, it kind of builds in that buy-in right from the beginning.
absolutely.
And another thing is, one, I this is something which we have done within the organization to ensure that people see value, is we started documenting achievements and learning. So we kept a record of how these people have been performing, what they've been achieving, what have been their key accomplishments throughout these stretch assignments, and documenting the entire journey, the progress, kind of helped us in recognizing that, this is how you have demonstrated your capabilities, and that further helped us in articulating the value they have derived from the experience.
Wonderful. Thanks, Pooja. I think very helpful points. I think one point that I like to add is also that I believe, just to get a deeper, another side to this particular question, is that organizations in the high potential selection process also need to start investigating what is the drivers of the individual, because the motivator and drivers of the individual are very critical. If I'm a person, like this Gartner research we were talking about earlier when I started the conversation, also found out that many people who are leaders don't want to be leaders. They would prefer not to be leading. Now, if I don't have the drive, and there is nothing wrong about it, it's just that it's my choice and I exercise that choice. So if I don't have the drive, and if I don't have the willingness, I'll find, development methodologies like stretch assignments as added work rather than as a way for me to develop myself. So I feel that an important layer of selection that needs to start coming in is the drivers of the individual, whether they may have the capabilities and they may have the potential, but they may lack the drive to be able to do that.
Sumit, I think this is one of the questions which has also been asked, where I think this is one of the questions which I was reading, that what do we do with people who do not have the drive?
Exactly. And I think, you're pretty bang on, Pooja. And I think first of all, it's okay for people to not have the drive to be a leader. Absolutely okay, right? And therefore, career pathing, career planning at a different level, of more technical achievement, maybe more preferable for those people, rather than to push people to become a leader when they don't want to become, one. All of us have different choices, and we must exercise that choice. Maybe I'll just take one more question, and then I think we should do a quick summary. Just one last question is around what are the metrics that you suggest for a leadership development journey? I know the metric question has been going on in the minds for a long time, so would love to hear your perspectives on that.
So a little more context there, Smith. Metrics to understand whether people are making progress.
Basically, metrics, the question is, what are the critical success factors or metrics for a leadership development journey?
Leadership development journey, okay.
Sumit, there are two things which we as an organization, we've been doing. So one is your lead and the other is your lag matrix. Now, obviously, there are certain matrix or certain areas where you see an improvement within a stipulated period of time, within a month or two. These are your low-hanging fruits. Now, there are certain metrics for which you'll have to give it a certain period of time, maybe an year or so, to see that needle movement to happen. For example, if we are looking at an impact to a business result, we need to identify what is the key performance indicator which we are trying to impact. Once we have zeroed down on that key performance indicator along with the business, then we need to start working towards it. All we need to show is that how the leadership development journey has created that needle improvement in that key performance indicator over a period of time. Now, this is from an organization, but of course, we also have to look at the personal development as a leader, that what has been their personal development. Now, again, for a personal development, to find out that you have your surveys in place to see that, you conduct a survey before the program starts to understand where the individual sees him or herself before the journey. And maybe after they are done through the journey, how do they feel that the journey has contributed to their own individual success? So these are some of the very easy and practical ways of nudging or gauging our leadership development journey, rather than giving a cliche answer that, it should have an impact on attrition. A leadership development journey cannot have an impact on attrition. Attrition is a factor which can be impacted with a lot of internal things which are around. So
thanks so much, Pooja. I think love the framework of the lead and lag. Vineet, Asfar, what would you like to add?
Go ahead, Vineet, and I'll follow up.
So when I was listening to this, what was going in my head was that, of course, and Pooja rightly said, there are no standard matrix that you could prescribe for something like this, because this is unique to the individual and to the organization's journey. So where is the organization, and what's the next phase for the organization for which they're preparing those future leaders, determines in many ways which are the kind of behaviors, competencies, or areas they would like their leaders to succeed in or develop in order to take the organization to that place. My only 2 cents to this will be that when you determine these success measures, which will be dependent on your environment, make sure that they are flexible. When I say flexible, they are connected to the new emerging workplace realities for people. They are transparent so that the stakeholders and the hypos and the stakeholders both can very clearly see where there is a need to change. And they are inclusive of all talent. So it's not just one-sided, loop-sided way of looking at things. They bring in inclusivity in how they are measured and how they are then presented to the organization. Azfar, over to you.
No, I completely echo that sentiment. Also, I think it depends on whether you're looking at it from an organization's perspective. So, for example, when you're doing top talent development, one of the reasons why you're doing it is because to build a stronger talent pipeline, which basically means that if you have any leadership roles opening up within the organization, you have this talent pipeline, people in this talent pipeline that take on those leadership. So one metric of whether a leadership development journey is worked or not is to check in a year's time or 2 years' time whether people who've been through that leadership development journey have taken on higher level roles. So that's one. But, in sync with what Pooja and Vineet have said, each leader's metrics are likely to be different from another leader's metric, because each person, while they've gone through a similar leadership development journey, are trying to develop themselves probably on different things. Because in a leadership development journey, you're likely to come across so many concepts, and they're not going to be everybody's not going to be implementing every concept. People will pick and choose what makes sense to them, and they'll try and implement them. And also, it depends on what the leadership development journey is focusing on. If it's, for example, most leadership development journeys will have a customer component, they'll have some strategic thinking component, they'll have a talent building component, they'll have a, operations or some efficiency part. So depending on that, you can, figure out what are some generic metrics if you really want to measure it that way. But my recommendation based on years of experience in this area is to try and keep this as simple as possible, because capturing these metrics and reporting them is a task by itself. So I would just suggest that at the end of any leadership development journey, after a certain while, have the person make a presentation on to a senior leadership team, saying on what they learned, what they implemented, and what impact they think they have made, and have a manager's perspective saying that here's the movement I think this person has made. Because in the end, why do you want to measure or have a metric? It's to convince your senior leadership that the investment they've made has been worthwhile. And the simpler that you keep this, the better.
Absolutely. Great. Thanks so much, everyone. I think we are reached the top of the hour. So I want to be conscious of and respectful for everyone's time. This was a wonderful, session. Thanks so much, Aswar, Vineet, Pooja, for your time today. Thank you to all the participants. You've given us a lot of list of questions. Unfortunately, given this was a shorter session, we could not cover all of them. But we'll make it a point to at least offline, provide answers to all of those questions. And thanks so much again, Aswar, Vineet, Pooja, for taking our time. This, really very helpful. We'll also very soon write a, like a blog on some of the thoughts we've gathered and send it across to you. It'll be good to co-author something around this very soon.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. Pleasure being here.
Pleasure meeting everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.